My name is Leif Christensen. I'm a licensed hydrogeologist. I'll tell you a little bit about what I did over there because I'm going to tell you a lot of opinions, personal opinions. I'm going to show you a lot of failures. So let me tell you how I came to these opinions. In 2008, well, I've been working in the private sector for some 30 years. I'm a geologist. I've done all kinds of stuff, but mostly have gravitated toward construction management in the last 20 years. In 2008, I found out that the Corps of Engineers was looking for people to help them over there. So I found out who the lead engineer was in Kabul. I sent him my resume, and 10 minutes later he called me, hired me on the phone, and I was over there in 6 weeks. And at that point, they put me in brigade headquarters in Host Province, eastern Afghanistan. The map's over there, so I won't get too specific, but I was, at the time, the 101st Airborne had 6 provinces in eastern Afghanistan. And we were a center for SERP spending. Does everybody here know what SERP is? Does anybody not know SERP? You know, it's this money that's provided by Congress for us to do development work. In 2008, our goal was to outspend everybody else. At division, we had, I think, 4 active brigades under division, and we were in a race. And by God, October, we threw our pencil down and we spent more money than anybody else. We built roads and schools and hospitals, you know, solar-powered street lights, wells for communities, all this various different stuff that we built. I was what they call a brigade PRT engineer, so all the projects came in from the PRTs and the ADTs would come to me for review. The colonel said I had his review pen, but I seldom used it because we were trying to outspend everybody. So pretty much if you had a fairly decent project and a good set of plans, or a fairly decent set of plans, and your costs were reasonable, then you got approved. That was kind of well, it was pretty wild. I mean, we built a lot of mistakes. When I was with the 101st, they found out that I'm a licensed hydrogeologist, so they asked me to manage a water study for them. So over 6 provinces, we did mostly through remote sensing, a large study that looked at all the valleys and where can we put in irrigation storage dams. I'll say this time and again, if you go to the dales, the males, you go out there in the villages, provinces, what's going to be the #1 request? It's going to be for water resources. They're not going to actually ask you for trees or anything. They're going to ask for help for the water. So that's the 101st asked me to lead this study. I stayed after the 101st rotated out, and I stayed until that study was done. It took about a year and a half. What we found out was that in all these valleys and everything where we projected you could build a dam, the hillsides are so stripped of vegetation and the hillsides are so erosive that if you try to put dams in these areas, they fill right up with sediment. It was a remarkable epiphany for me that you just really can't in most areas build these things. All right, so moving forward, I went home. The 101st then went up to division. Friends of mine started asking if I'd come back and be their water resources coordinator. So I did. I switched hats from the Corps of Engineers. I went over to working for the Department of Agriculture, USDA. 2010, late 2010 through late 2011, I was what was known as the Water Resources Coordinator for Regional Command East. And they had 15 provinces, and I traveled all around to help all units, ADTs, PRTs, Civil Affairs, Special Forces. Anybody who needed help or anywhere I could inject myself and try to help. This photo here to start off with kind of sets the tone for the talk. One of the places I was asked, Sergeant Phipps here from the Missouri ADT asked me to come up to Nangarhar, and because this village was requesting check dams. Well, check dams are things that you build up in the hills to slow erosion down. We'll talk about those quite a bit today. So I get up there and I'm looking around. I'm going, oh, you can't build check dams in this community. So beyond protocol, I'm sitting here glaring at the translator trying to figure out what's going on. So yeah, you shouldn't be looking at him. I should be looking at the head dog. That's one thing to take away. Finally figured out that what they wanted, it was a terminology thing. They wanted us to put diversion dams in the river to cut water into their canal systems, and we'll talk about those too. But it took a while. Things like check dams, watersheds, these terms have become buzzwords to the Afghans, and they don't know what they mean. So if one thing we do in the next hour is increase your vocabulary to the point where you're a little bit fluent about what these structures are, about what watersheds are, about what you can do there, you really learned a lot. I'm going to show you in the next hour a whole bunch of pictures, kind of my slideshow of Afghanistan, but this is the only one of me in it. I'm going to show you failures, lots of things we did wrong. And so why do we do these things wrong? It's because we don't pay attention to the previous outfit, or we don't look back to the resources that are available. Such people as are here at ADAPT. You'll have my email at the end of this. During your tour, you can always call me, email me. But there are resources so that you don't have to go in there and try to figure out how to do things or make things up. Go in there and ask the experts. We've been there a long time. Let's not do these things over and over again. And, you know, people like Sergeant Phipps, he was learning Pashto. He was working in these villages. He was training these people. He was killed 9 days after this photo was taken outside this village. So, in the name of people like Sergeant Phipps, I like to try and do things right here. So, going forward, here's the key messages we'll talk about today. Poor design is probably the worst thing we do. We don't go in there with a good enough design for them. Lack of qualified construction management. You can't just hand off a project of any significance to the Afghans and walk away. You have to go in there and guide and mentor them during the project. The intervening social and physical environmental realities. I'm not going to talk. I'm going to be a nuts and bolts guy here. I'm going to say put rock A in position B. People like Dr. Ruffner comes up, John Groninger. They will talk a lot about the social environments there. I want to be just a nuts and bolts guy for you today. But boy, it's so important to understand who you're working with. And extensive training of these people that you work with. To do a watershed restoration project where you're putting in check dams and hillside ditches and things that we'll talk about today, that takes a heck of a lot of training. And not only, it's good training. You have to sit down, you have to give them tests, you have to make sure that they understand it. If they don't, they'll put it in wrong. The thing will fail. Seen it time and again. What I'll go through here in the next hour, talk a little bit about what a watershed is, watershed restoration methods. We will briefly touch on water storage and distribution systems, and also it's a brief touch on erosion and flood control measures. Some of these things can be fairly complex, and I want to tell you that they're complex and leave you with the impression that they're complex. So if you get involved in something like that, you call in a subject matter expert. Make a note here that John Fripp from USDA NRCS, a good friend of mine, has provided a lot of the training materials. We had two watershed workshops while I was over there. I organized two of them, one in Fob Salerno and Host, and then one in Kabul for all of RC East. And John came to both of those, helped with the instructions at those watersheds, and a lot of the graphs and stuff he's developed. What's a watershed? Now, I've never been too fluent on what a watershed actually is. I think to me they're fairly obvious. Here's the divide. Everything on this side of this divide flows this way. Everything on this side of the divide flows that way. So if you go through the divides, find out where the divide is, that's a huge watershed. But there's a smaller watershed right here. So, everything that falls in here is released to a common point, such as a river or lake, and that includes both surface and groundwater. We'll talk a bit about groundwater today, too. So everybody understand conceptually what a watershed is. We have parts of a watershed. The upper part, up in the mountains, it's called the collection zone. Down here where the rivers have formed and they're still fairly steep, it's transport. And down here where most of the irrigation is deposition zone. Each zone has a different strategy. Up in the top here, you want to keep the soil where it is and encourage infiltration. Most of my theme today is to slow the water down and get it to infiltrate. What we do is we lose, because they've taken all the vegetation out of these hillsides, we want to get this water to infiltrate, soak in, and then they can grab the groundwater later. And the transport, let the water and the sediment flow through and protect and strengthen the banks. This is where we'll talk about such things as riparian buffers. And down in the deposition zone, keep it from blowing away. I'm not going to talk too much about this down here. I'm mostly up slope. You have to understand the processes at work. What do they do over there? They overgraze. If they could just I suppose kill 2/3 of their goats, they'd be so much better off. But if you've been there a while, you've all said the same thing. Deforestation is huge. This is a picture I took up in Bamiyan province. This mule train starts at daybreak, ends at sunset. They go up into the upper watershed and haul every brush, everything they can. This is their fuel for cooking. So you're going to take everything out of the watershed, take all your sediment, your vegetation out of there. You are going to decrease your rainland, you're going to increase erosion, and you're going to have less infiltration. So the basic issue, and we've known this for years over there, everybody realizes this. If you don't have the vegetation, you're going to lose everything 55% to runoff. 55% to runoff rather than 10% to runoff. So our main goal is to increase infiltration up there. There's a couple things you're called on. We need more water for agriculture. We need more water for drinking. But we also have these flash flood events all the time that takes out part of the village. These flash floods are also mitigated by increasing infiltration. I'll talk a little bit about the mechanical methods of doing watershed restoration. I call them mechanical methods. What's the best thing to do? The best thing would be to reestablish the vegetation up on the slope. Let's get rid of the goats. Let's manage our grazing. Don't have the goats eat through the seed cycle every season, and they do. That would be the best thing. Those are political things that take a long time. Those arrangements, take a long time to get these villagers to agree to. It's between them and the nomadic tribes. It's stuff that, I've never seen anybody who could sit in there long enough to actually make these agreements enforced and keep them going. So rather than the best method of increasing vegetation up there, I'm going to talk about the mechanical methods where we can increase infiltration. I sure appreciate if you guys stop and ask me a question at any time. So we'll talk about the check dams, hillside ditches, and rock bunds are three of the most common methods we use out there. Check dams are up high in the collection zone. They can be in the transport zone as well. Classic check dam with my friend John Fripp. This is the noisiest slide, Colonel, that I've got because I would get kicked out of the bub with a slide like this. But let me just read this one through, and we'll all know what check dams are now. They're small dams. They're put in gullies. They're loose rock structures. They're not meant to stop water. They're meant to slow water down. Water can come through the cracks in the check dam. That's fine. You want to slow water down. They're trap sediment. They are used in open. I'll learn this. They're used in open channels and gullies. They're not effective in well-defined stream channels. Stream channel this wide, you don't put a check dam in something like that. You put it up above in the tributaries. Slopes less than 20%, but I've certainly put them in a little bit steeper than that. Use hard, good rock. They should be kept below 1.5 meters in height. Don't go up. You're making engineered dams when you go up this high. Center of the dam is always a little bit below the sides. The reason is you put your center of the dam down like that, you're making the water come out of the center of the dam. So you're telling the water which way to exit the dam. And it's got to be keyed in. I'm getting good at this. Let's see. It has to be keyed into the bottom and into the sides. We're going to talk a lot about doing things in gullies and in stream beds and things like this. The key to doing anything in a stream bed, putting a structure in, is keying it in. That means you dig into the stream bed. You'll have to go in there a good meter or so, half meter. You'll also have to go into the banks. Why? Because that will scour out underneath. Or the water will come around the edges, and it'll do it the first thing. If you just build up to the edge of a gully, the first thing is the water will just go around that. So you have to go to the edge of the gully and inside. So the key is the key. Check dams work as a team. As the water comes down here and tumbles over, if you don't have anything down below, you'll get scouring down below here eventually, and you'll wash this away. We're going to do a little field exercise today. Remember this diagram, please. So we do, we put, generally speaking, you want the top of this dam about equal to the bottom of this dam. So depending on your slope, you know, you can calculate and how high it is, you can calculate. Or I've got a chart up here that'll help you do that. This noisy little slide just shows that this is the check dam itself. It's keyed into the sides, it's keyed into the bottom, and it's got what's called a control section in the center that forces the water out. Questions yet? All right. I certainly don't expect anybody to remember 1 meter 60 centimeters. Just dig it in, you know, really dig it in. As this control section, that's where the water comes out. So the water is going to come out the center of this thing. So what's going to happen? You have to prevent scour. So as that water comes out the top of that dam, build also what they call an energy dissipation section, 2 times the height of the check dam. You've got a disc here, and on that disc from ADAP, on that disc I put a lot more information about check dams and everything I'm talking about. So this is, you know, the brief overview. But just remember that go into that disc at any time. That's probably a disc if you go overseas. You take that disc with you. That's probably not this big lunker of a notebook, but the disc has a lot of extra information. And here's a little chart about spacing, you know. Determine how high your check dam is going to be, what the slope is, and you'll see what the spacing would be.
What do they make the check dam out of?
Thank you. Rocks that are on hand, hopefully. You know, hopefully you do have rocks in the gully. What size rock do you want to use? Big?
Baseball, softball size.
You want to go bigger, generally. What you do want to do is you want to go into that gully and see what the biggest rock that gully's moved, right? What's been moved down that gully? If you see boulders like this, you're kind of in trouble because you're going to have to be building rock, moving that rock. But Afghans can do that, actually. You know, they will move rock like they're amazing people when it comes to doing physical activities. So good, hard, competent rock, but as big as you see being moved. All right, it's a test time. So let's look at a couple of check dams. Check dams I have known. What do you think? Who wants to comment on this? Excuse me?
Based on what you said, it's just a whole amount of small rocks there.
And all those rocks below it are bigger.
I heard bigger. Well, I'd go with bigger rock, yes. It's a beautiful, beautiful structure. These guys got flat rock, nicely, I don't know what the hell that's about. I guess I'm on record here today. I've got to watch myself, but it gets worse. Yeah, the rock's too small. The rock is definitely too small. What else? Control section. I don't see any way that this stuff's good. Yeah, it doesn't have any control section. What else?
Energy dissipation section.
Pardon?
Has it got an energy dissipation section? I can't see what
Called the energy dissipation, see, has no like.
Right, it has no downstream energy dissipation, right. Okay, what else? A couple other things here.
Doesn't really appear to go into
Doesn't look
the
like it's keyed into anything.
keyed in.
Well, I hate to give it away, but there's important concepts here that are being missed. Anything else? What I really want everybody to concentrate on through this whole talk and everything that I'm building in gullies is this thing is not cut into the sides, and this thing is laying on top of the on top. He didn't cut it into the slope that way or this way, and he didn't cut it into here. Didn't cut it into the stream bed. There's something else wrong with this.
It's too low. We posted the dash we positioned a little high. Because that's a little
Well,
like a curve.
It looks like it might be a bit high, but here, what I'm getting at is this is an established stream channel. This is a big, wide structure. This holds serious water during the spring melt. In fact, it's got a tributary that comes in from this way, and the main gully is actually going out this way. You can't tell that. So this is at the confluence of here's 1, 2 right up there coming into here, and a third one that's coming down this way. They put in some 200 of these check dams. They all washed out the first season. You know, and I went up there and looked at this, and I went, you guys, A, B, C, and D, but they didn't fix it. Of course, what do you do here? And they lost each one of these. This is the kind of stuff that, you know, that I'm saying that you don't have to invent this. You don't have to go in there with your hubris or whatever and think, well, I know how to do check dams, or I know how to do this, we'll just throw this up here, because this has caused so much instability for us to put this together and have it wash out the first year. And then those villages wanted us to pay them to rebuild them, in which case the outfit turned away and never went back there again.
So would you have gone up higher? I mean, how long ago?
Yeah.
Things that are wrong. You would have gone to one of the.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's way up here is where you need to check dam. You need to be way up in the hills up here.
They can install like 3 of them.
Yeah.
Higher instead of one going across it.
Well, actually, you install as many as you can, because you know it's the bottom, top of this one to the bottom of this one, whatever. How that. How about this? It's in a lot of ways similar to the previous one. This is also in host. It doesn't appear to be cut into the banks or cut into the stream bed. It looks like it's a pretty established stream, but it's a shallow stream, and they put in quite a few here. These may protect each other, but without a control section and without it being cut in here, you're in trouble. You are in trouble. These things, you know, you look at this and it's a desert, but come back in the spring melt when it's rainy season. And in host in particular, they have monsoons that come up from Pakistan. And this area sees a lot of rain. They'll see some events where they'll get several inches of rain a day. That coincides with snow melt up in the mountains. These things, you know, this water will be this high. So you certainly need to build a good-sized rock. You have to cut it into the banks and into there and get your control section, your energy dissipation section. You have to build them right. Okay. How about this one? This looks pretty good, except I don't know if they dug it in here or not. But this one here is a B+ at least. Dr. Harry Bader, interesting USAID guy who was up in Nangarhar, worked in Nangarhar and Konar, put together what was called the Tree Army. He was just trying to find ways to put villages to work, and he stumbled across doing check dams. And he got these guys that would work together. He trained them all in classes. This could be in fact, Harry does an hour long on his program. It's a pretty good program. He got a lot of people working together. I call this one the mother of all check dams. This is up in Nangarhar province, and we had to walk for an hour to an hour and a half. I mean, left the MRAPs way behind, got way up on this hillside. I wanted to see these things. The guys, they'll work. I mean, they will work. They carried all the concrete and the water or whatever way the heck up this hillside and built these things up there. You know, a check dam is meant to be let water pass through. I am not in favor of doing these types of solid check dams. It was cut into the side. It was cut into the floor here. It's got the energy dissipation section. It's got a control section. It's a beautiful check dam. I'd almost rather see loose rock that would let water infiltrate. On a dam like this and on others, when the water's going to go through this, it's going to back silt up and back here. So eventually you're going to do something, and so going in, you're going to tell the community that eventually you're going to have to remove the silt in back of this. That should just be an O&M that they're aware of when they build these things.
Sir, I've got a question.
Sure.
Increasing infiltration, does that just help raise the water table?
It does. It helps raise the water table, and it also stops these flash floods, mitigates flash flooding. So we're, and I'll talk just a little bit more about that soon, but the whole goal is to get things to infiltrate, not run off. You lose your water to runoff. If it doesn't infiltrate, that one diagram that I showed, it's 55% runoff versus 10% runoff on a vegetated slope. So what we're trying to do is stop that runoff. All the water is lost to runoff. It goes down the hill, goes through the village, it goes out in the valley, and it's lost. Nobody gets to use it. So the other,
Sorry, Lee.
Yeah, go ahead.
The thing on check dams is, it was hard for me to convince Afghans that check dams are temporary. They seem to want to build one and think it's going to stay there forever. And I was using the examples of the CCC in the 30s, going back and rebuilding them after a rainfall event or something like that, and walking the stream bed and kind of placing the rocks back up on top, because they are really temporary structures. They're not meant to be permanent like that.
Yeah, and when we approach a village about doing this, we would say it's something that needs constant O&M.
Right.
Every year you're going to have to go up there and repair your check dams. Now eventually, you know, one thing is they'll fill in with silt. You could leave that filled in with silt and just make another series of check dams right down below like that. Keep doing that if you'd like. You know, that's another way of doing this. But they do need O&M. Some of them will wash out. Some rock needs to be moved out again. Hillside ditches and terraces. These are another way to reduce soil erosion and, you know, retain runoff. These can be installed higher on steeper slopes than the check dams. So the check dams, usually you're going up a slope like this, and above the check dams, you'll put in your ditches. Spaced, and they must be placed along contour. This is an important thing to do. We'll show you a little bit about that in a field exercise this afternoon. It's a very simple concept. These are just shallow ditches, you know, a foot or so deep, foot and a half deep. You compact the ridge here, you excavate it here, you put it there, you just stomp it down with your feet. Every 30 meters or so, you put a ditch plug in. These things have to be on contour. If they're not on contour, then you're going to start a stream bed and it's going to do erosion. So just to guarantee that you're not doing, you know, a stream bed, you'll put these plugs in every once in a while like that. The spacing can be easily figured by this. I mean, that's not rocket science. Here's a good project like that. In Logar and Wardak province, I worked with the Georgia ADT, and they put in, they were stellar. They put in some 12 large projects, probably put 5,000 Afghans to work doing this. We did large designs over large areas of watershed restoration projects. There were primarily check dams in the gullies and these hillside ditches. They were very successful. I think of those 12, 3 of them, I had the chart and I should have brought it. I think 3, maybe 4 weren't successful for you know counterinsurgency security reasons. They couldn't do them all, but they did quite a bit. And then the third method that I'll show you is rock buns. I've never actually put rock buns in. I just want you to be aware that this is an easy method. It's a method to be used on a slope where the slope is very rocky and you can't dig into the slope very easily. Instead of trying to dig ditches down, you can do shallow rock walls, the same spacing as a ditch, constructed parallel to the slope. And they're the same principle. They're permeable and they slow water down. The main reason for putting in things like this is you always want to keep as water runs down the hill, keep it into sheet flow. Don't let the water start going into rills, because rills will start your erosion and you'll start forming gullies like that. You put these rock walls, little rock ridges along it'll keep everything in sheet flow. A little bit of the how you do it here. Photograph, you know, these would be the check dams in here. I guess we could say, what's wrong with this check dam? Quite a few things, but just a concept on rock buns. Any questions on buns, ditches, check dams? Hope that's in your vocabulary now. You may be, you know, this isn't just Afghan specific by any means. Africa, Somalia, these practices go in everywhere. You people in civil affairs are going to be around the world. Keep this stuff close to you. Someday look at that disc and the other information I put on this disc. I think you'll find some useful stuff for your trade. Slow the water down. Here's another one from the Georgia ADT where they have the ditches on top and the check dams here. I think the spacing's good. I don't know about the energy dissipation, but you know, if you get through, it's shallow enough. I think it's going to be great, and especially because it's protected by this. Those dams and coasts that all washed out. One thing I also told them is you better put some ditches on these hillsides, and they didn't do that either. They just put their check dams in without trying to contain the runoff from the hills as well, and that was just a recipe for disaster there. Do a little bit about the Afghan water storage and distribution systems. I know that half of you or something I think have been to Afghanistan, so you're familiar with some of these Khorasan canal systems and things that they have over there. briefly, you know, a Kerez. You'll see these things are remarkable structures in Afghanistan. Absolutely, they're very old. No, I don't think that any community I ever went to knew what age their Kerez was. It was hundreds of years before they were born. Most of these were built. I understand there's families from Iraq or Iran that can still do these, but I don't know of any that have been constructed in the last couple hundred years. What they do is they go up onto the hillside. So you're going up onto the hillside, you dig a mother well in to find out where the water table is, go down below the water table, and then bring that water out at a shallow angle so you can get it clear out here. And all the way along, while you're bringing that in, they put in access shafts. So you see these access shafts from the air. They look something like this. And you know, you'll see these things run for miles out into valleys. It looked like bomb craters or something. And some of them are just ancient. I don't know, 1,000 years old, or pretty amazing, remarkable systems. A couple things you can do about, you know, rehabilitation. This is where you want to do your infiltration up in the hills, because that'll increase the water, the groundwater, and increase the water to flow to the Kerez systems. So in a lot of where I went target a watershed restoration project, one of the best targets I could find were the hills above Kerez systems. You know, we would chart, see where the Kerez systems are originating, and above those hills put in your ditches and check dams. So you increase infiltration, you increase groundwater, you'll increase flow to these Kerezes. And that's what we did a lot with the Georgia ADT and Logar and Wardak. Another thing is to reduce the infiltration losses between the outlet where the Kerez comes out and then it's distributed out to the irrigation, you know, canals. You can, you know, do things by lining it with concrete. They require maintenance every once in a while. One of the things we used to do under the SERP program was pay the villages to do their maintenance. This is very contentious. It became very contentious with the ministries in Kabul, who hated the military for paying them to do their own stuff. They thought that shouldn't be done. The reason why, I think, in the most part, was you're trying to make an inroad into that village. And what you know is, you go into a village and you're trying to, you know, establish some bond with them. The first thing, one of the easiest things, was we knew how to pay them to clean their own Kerez systems out. They should be doing that themselves. Cleaning the Kerez system. They got the old boys on top, and they've got a kid down below, about 12 years old, down here in a tunnel about like this, you know, digging it out. It's freezing cold down there and it's wet, but not OSHA approved. Here's what I'm talking about, taking the Kerez system is coming in like this, and from here it's being distributed out to their fields. And this is where we do concrete lining, so they reduce infiltration losses on your canals. Now, this is simple. I mean, this is what you can do, concrete lining of things. We did so much. We spent so much money concrete lining over there that I will talk a little bit about concrete lining later. But anyway, that's yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, this is my brief section on storage dams. This is the truth. I got to. This is a typical Afghan dam, Sirkad Dam in Logar. I could do an hour-long National Geographic on the dams of eastern Afghanistan. This is a typical dam in eastern Afghanistan. I think this one was built by the English. I'm not sure. I've got notes. I should know that. This is the dam face looking downstream. Here's the dam face right here. These things fill up. And that's what I was talking about in the first part. The watersheds are so erosive that these things can fill up. But this one here was reputed to have filled up within 2 years. And I've got pictures of a dozen dams like this in eastern Afghanistan. I don't have a picture of a dam in eastern Afghanistan that retains 50% of its storage capacity. And in fact, about every dam that I saw over there was absolutely completely stuffed with sediment and no longer worked. But it's one of the most requested things. So if you're out in the village or if you're talking to the ministries, they'll want you to build dams. And we've come back to them and say, well, you have to fix your watersheds. You know, you need watershed restoration projects, check dams and stuff. And then that filters down And here I am out in the village, and the guy wants a check dam. Well, you know, these terminology, that's what I started out saying. The terminology has become, you know, pretty common over there. Check dams, watersheds, but they don't understand those terms. They just know that we won't build them, these things, anymore. And this is the reason why. A couple things here. Of course, the watersheds are too erosive. They require hydraulic. I never said that, even though I am one. And engineering surveys. Didn't that seem obvious, you know? But where is that picture? I've never done this. That one there. This dam, in 2008, I was in host province at brigade headquarters for about 3 weeks. Brand new at the job, didn't know a thing about what's going on. And I was caught in the hallway by the SERP manager, by the local PRT manager, commander, and Dale for that province. And they caught me in the hallway and said that they want this dam built. And they had this kind of a sketch cartoon of a dam design. Well, she was such a, you know, she was a stellar commander with a great reputation and very eloquent. And pretty soon I'm in a room signing, okay, yeah, we need to build this dam. We built the dam, and I can't tell you how much this has failed. I went after 2 years after this picture. It's overtopped the dam. It's taken all the sediments away from this side and away from this side. This box here is no longer, because it's overtopped and blew away this whole box. I believe it's in danger of someday just washing out.
I'm going to ask a question that we seem to get in almost every course. Given this sediment, are there any options for releasing, I think the pressure is what folks often ask. Is there anything we can do about this buildup?
I've talked to quite a few engineers about this. Is this a problem? If you have this much, and ladies and gentlemen, these sediments, when it's backed up like this is going a mile to a mile and a half upstream like this. Sediments are amazing. So when you back up that much and it's all waterlogged, does that put extra pressure on the dam? Evidently, the engineers tell me the dams aren't in danger of failure so much. If they, you know, they are engineered dams for the most part that won't fail because of this stuff in here. Now, the second question is, I think that you're alluding to, is can you fix this? Can you remove this? I think there's a general formula that it costs 7 times as much to take the silt out of a dam as it did to originally build the thing. But in most areas, like, how would you take this silt out of there? Would you build a road up into here? I'm not sure. I mean, the works project would be so huge, so complex. That's certainly international funding and beyond what civil affairs or CERT projects or anything else you're going to do. Once these things are like that, it's out of the hands of this audience. Charles?
I've seen farmers start to use these as like alluvial terraces, because that's like the best soil in the world to grow stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't seen it done, but that's been suggested, and I don't see why not. It's great soil, sure. It's great soil. So they require these surveys, and I signed off on that one dam for the commander without a survey. I've done it. Other people have done it. Let's quit doing it. I hope that dams can be killers. Any dam over 3 meters in height. That was our cutoff, was 3 meters. After that, you need an engineering design. If this silts up quickly, it has long-lasting consequences. The Afghans hear that you're going to build a dam. They breathe wind of building a dam. You'll have families start moving into the valley thinking there's going to be increased access to water and irrigation. And so if you even go in there and breathe words, and this, I've been involved in this situation, where we've been doing a survey to see if we could build a dam there. That somehow became a promise that we were going to build that dam. And it was the most destabilizing thing you had to work with for 5 years, because they said, previous unit promised. Well, no, I've actually been here with the previous unit. They didn't promise, but it was considered a promise to them. Some of these places where I'd go, I'd try to figure out what the heck was. What happened here is they built this dam here, and they were going to, I think they had a canal system that they were going to run off this way. It was hard to tell. It was so so filled in with silt. But what had happened, if you build a dam like this here, now you've raised the bed. So you've raised the stream bed. So what the stream did then was cut over this way, down into here. That's where the village was. Now the village is being washed out because this dam is here. How do you fix this? I said, well, do you have explosives, or, how do you think you're going to fix it? Okay, a separate subject is a diversion dam. And this is what that unit called me up with Sergeant Phipps to talk about. Actually, it was a diversion dam. These things are terrible. The easiest, quickest, the only one that works in a diversion dam. Of course, a diversion dam, what are we talking about? They want to put their water from a stream, and the stream's running here, so they will put in some sort of a structure like this. Then they'll have a canal, and of course that'll branch out to their canal systems like this. So you're going to put in a structure here for diversion. It's going to make the water come here and go out this way, right? Diversion dams. What we've done with diversion dams is they want concrete diversion dams. They want permanent, nice, beautiful things. But a concrete diversion dam fills up with sediment the first flood season. They fail 100% of the times, not sometimes. They always fail. So the best thing is, and this is taken out of the back of a Special Forces vehicle, not a good picture, but the best thing is to just push it up with a dozer or something like that, push it up, and then it goes out this way to their systems. That way, in the spring, when you have flooding, it'll blow this thing out of there, and it's all gone. You start up again next year with pushing this stuff up. Now, I don't know if in California you can actually get a dozer in your river and push sediment up like that. But you can do that. All you do is you tell those fish to put their goggles on and get the dozer out. And so diversion dams are only successful if they're built so that sediment is allowed to wash out. Another way you can build these dams is to actually come in here and do at the stream bed level is put in a concrete bed with post holes in it. That way you can put in post holes, batten boards every year, but you'd have to pull that out at the end of the irrigation system. Let the gravel go through. If you build a concrete diversion dam, they always fail. Now the river used to come through here, but we built a concrete diversion dam. We actually raised the bed of the river here. The river is now clear over here, and the canal system they had going over there is high and dry. Because we've actually, by building this, we've raised the bed of the stream and moved the whole shoot and match that way. Sometimes you go out here and I do what I call forensic hydrogeology. You can't even tell what was actually meant. But I guess this was a diversion dam here. Here was the canal works that headed out that way. They all fill up. That's a repeat. Yeah, just diversion dams. I had USAID people who, I would also review their projects when I was at Division. And, this one $21 million project they wanted to do, 21 $1 million concrete diversion dams down this river in Kapisa province. Well, it's easy to, we've got remote sensing. It's just great in Afghanistan. So I just went to the remote sensing database, pulled up the river, pulled up the picture, showed him the failed diversion dams that were built just a couple of years prior, and sent it back to him and said, this is my review of your project. You can't do these things. They don't work. So, okay, I think I've said that. Groundwater wells, I'll say a little bit about these. We put in groundwater wells everywhere. This is one of the most, probably the most requested single item project we've done in Afghanistan, groundwater wells everywhere. So I'll tell you just a little bit about it. As a young geologist, I would sit here and log these wells, and I'd make sure that your gravel pack is in and all the depths are correct, and down at the bottom you have, your well screen is put in here with packed gravel and crushed stone around your well screen, all that stuff. In Afghanistan, nobody's ever logged a well, as far as I know, unless it was put in by, the red team in the military. The only thing that I would really say, that if you're there, make sure that you have a good concrete surface seal. So these things are actually conduits to the aquifer. If you don't have a good seal up there, any spill, any surface runoff, any crap can go right down this space and go right into your groundwater. So always make sure you have a good seal around the top when you do these things.
Lee, in RC South, there's like a moratorium on groundwater wells.
Excellent.
People have dug so many wells, they're just sucking the country dry. So now there's virtually a moratorium on. How do you feel about that? I heard you say excellent. Well, a moratorium, I don't agree on a complete moratorium. Let's go through this.
you need wells. You need the groundwater wells. They're the safest drinking water source out there. So it's the most common drinking water source. You have to be properly constructed. Here's the point that I'd make, Charles, that if you use a hand pump on a well, you're not going to stress the aquifer. What your moratorium addresses is using wells that have motorized pumps to them. I would never approve a motorized pumped well in all of RC East, not one. There was a school, I'll take that back. The school in Host was right on the riverbank. They could actually put the well just about in the river, and they could pump out of that. That was the only case. No motorized pumps. You know, for the most part, the soil is really, it's a silt clay. If you motorize pump that thing, you will pull in all these fines into your screens, and you'll clog the thing the first day. You'll ruin the first day. So if we put wells in a village, and they tell us a week later the well didn't work, we know what happened, you know. And yes, we have put in wells multiple times. There's a refugee camp, I'm thinking in Gardez, that this well go dry, so we put one 10 feet the next week, another 10 feet next week. Well, here's a good point. At least 30 meters upstream from latrines and livestock pens and stuff. I was in Bamiyan, stopped at a school we were building, and there they had the well about 10 feet downstream, downslope from a 6-stall outhouse. I hope they moved it. I requested they did. That's about all I'd say about groundwater wells. There isn't a lot you can do. They drill so slow, they drill by the method that's called a cable tool, where you actually pound the dirt, then put water in it, then put a bucket in it, and pull up the water in the sediment. It's really slow. I mean, the Chinese did it 2,000 years ago using bamboo. It's very slow. Nobody's ever going to log a well. You're not going to log the installation of the pipe, but make sure it's got a surface seal. Talk a little bit about erosion and flood control. This is stuff that I'm not going into in depth. These are some of these topics. Flood walls, you know, at least an hour needs to be spent on these. But these are another thing that commonly fail in Afghanistan. Flood walls are some of the most requested projects that we get. But if you don't, like I said earlier, if you don't key it into the bank, key it into the floor of the stream, then they fail. Usually constructed of gabion baskets. Now we can do stone riprap, and in the disc I put together some guidelines for doing stone riprap. I won't go into here, but gabion baskets are. It's amazing how many of these flood walls have been built. It's probably the second most requested thing from the Dales is to provide us with gabion baskets, and some of those Dales have 30 or 40,000 gabion baskets in back of their shop that they sell and probably skim the money. Does everybody know what a gabion basket is? I'm sorry. These are wire cages. They come in Afghanistan folded together. You unfold them, and they're basically a square at that point. You unfold them. You take wire and you wire them together, wire the sides. They're loose. What you use them because then on the outside of the gabion you can use large rock, but you can just fill the inside with small rock. So it's like building a big boulder. We use them here in the States quite a bit too. High failure rate. I don't have a lot of pictures. I wish as I was driving around. But driving around, you will see gabion baskets out in the middle of any wadi in Afghanistan. I'm saying just about every wadi has these things out in the middle. This is another forensic hydrogeology thing. Be driving along and see gabion baskets out in the middle of the wadi, and you're wondering, was the stream bank there at one time or what? You know, these things fail all the time. The big thing about a flood wall is the QA. I'm telling you, it needs to be cut into the bank and cut into the stream bed. You have to ensure that on a project. And basically, anytime you're going to do it, why don't you get hold of a subject matter expert? Another erosion technique are riparian buffers. These are good projects for local villages. They're tough projects. You know, a riparian buffer is just the edge of your stream. You have vegetation along the edge of your stream. It protects the stream bank. It intercepts the sediments. It also intercepts sediments coming down from the hillside. You know, it cleans it up. If you had fish, it shades and cools the stream as well. But they're really good for controlling erosion. What do you plant in there is locally proven species. About those species, you probably want to do more trees than bushes. If you put in willows, they might be more susceptible to being pilfered, whereas a stand of trees has a little bit more respect and a little bit more ownership to it. I think, Charles, you speak to that a little bit, and certainly John Groninger will. After construction, keep the livestock out of the buffer and manage the firewood harvesting. These are issues you'll have to deal with prior to even doing any of these. Briefly, the riparian buffer where you'll be working is pretty much the overbank zone here, trying to keep this vegetated and perhaps planting trees up into the next zone as well. Around Logar Province, Highway 1, here's an area that's really nice riparian buffers. So they're keeping this stream in place. This thing is not eroding out, doesn't blow out across their farmlands. Where you don't have it, the stream will blow out, called sedimentation, which is, of course, the opposite of erosion. So these things will fill in like this. We should be trying to establish a riparian buffer plantings along the edge here. Here's a cute little erosion control method, and it's actually nobody's heard of this, but it's actually very successful. Stream deflectors, they're called stream barbs. They have these names called Benway weirs. If you ever Google any of these names, boom, you'll have just a body of information you can't believe. The basic concept is stream goes like this. The water comes in here, but it comes off these things perpendicular. So you're building like a rock, a gabion wall or something like that out into the channel. Of course, when you build this, you have to what? Key it into the bank. You have to key it into the bed. But you put these in here like that, and it'll throw the water this way, and it'll make sediment fill in here and here. You can actually, where you have erosion in something like this, you can actually fill this in. It'll start filling in. So you can stop the erosion of this bend in the river like that. There's some guidelines. You can really get wrapped around the axle on what the angle here is and stuff like that. Of course, the Corps of Engineers will do 4 pages of calculations. I'm going to tell you that 45 degrees, let's do that. It's field expedient out there where you're at. So if you just tip them up 45 degrees, they'll be successful enough. Channel bed has to be somewhat stable. You can't do really steep U's. And they can be very effective. There's a little bit more guidance, of course, on that disc again. The river here in eastern Paktika is flowing this way. I'd like a couple comments on this if you got them.
Doesn't look like it's really in the bend of it. Doesn't look like it's in the bend of the stream, so it seems kind of out of place.
Well, yeah, you can't tell that very well, but actually the stream did come through this way, and they were doing this because, and you can't tell that, because this farmer and the series of farmers that are over in here were complaining they're losing their farmland. The river used to be out this way, but it's cut a bend in right here, so they're putting these in. And again, the river's slowing down that way. Any comment?
It's going the wrong way.
It's going the wrong way. Who said that? A student. It is. They put the barb in the wrong way. A couple other things here.
Not keyed into the bank.
That's what I'm trying to get across to you folks. Key everything into the banks. This is just horrible to see it just stop at the bank here. Anything that's built like that, the water will just K right around it, and pretty soon you'll see this thing sitting in the middle of a big wadi. It'll be in the middle of a wadi, the bank will be over here somewhere, and you're doing forensic hydrogeology, trying to figure out what the heck this thing was in the first place. It's not keyed into the bank, it's not keyed into here, and it's bent the wrong way. So let's turn around and take a picture upslope to see what it looks like. And here they are, all pointed downstream, but they worked. The water hit it, the water comes down here, it comes off perpendicular, and instead of stopping erosion for this farmer and this farmland, we've increased the erosion here. This was actually done under the supervision of a USDA NRCS person. So what are you going to do? Certainly civil affairs, something like that, you would lean on your civilian advisor I just, maybe look at your disc that is provided and double check things like this, because this is a nightmare. This is really a...
Wait, that looks like a wing dam.
A what?
A wing dam?
There's a series of them here. You see this?
Yeah.
Here's one, here's one, here's one. No, they'd put in barbs. None of them keyed in, of course. But for the most part, angled downstream hasn't worked for them. Any other questions about barbs? Okay. Getting toward the end here, I talked a little bit about seasonal scheduling. In the wintertime, you should be, in late fall in the winter, you should be getting arm in arm with your village elders, your dales, even the ministries, and teaching them about, what can be done. This is after they've identified that they have a problem with water or whatever. So what are we going to do? Well, if you're going to do anything like watershed projects, or you're going to do check dams or hillside ditches, if you're going to terrace, if you're going to do plantings or anything like that, I stress that there's a lot of education that goes into this. These people aren't stupid, but they don't have the education. They'll build things wrong if you don't do the education. In the spring, you can start putting in, as the snow melts, start putting in your check dams. Your hillside ditches go up in the higher elevations, your check dams below that. In the summer and the fall, you can do your soil bioengineering. That's the riparian buffers, stream barbs, flood walls, concrete line. So just in summary, I really want to say that good design, that's what we started with talking about. The training of the workforce and appropriate QA. That means if you set up a large project, you have to go out there and make sure they do it right. Keep it simple. Keep it community oriented. I think this slide got out of place, but I talk about it anyway. We like to do a lot of stuff by remote sensing. Here was a project we set up for the Tennessee ADT in Patia province. This is where we would put in, the upper portions are where we'd put in hillside ditches. Red lines are where we get our gullies, check dams in. We actually had some bioengineering along the stream down there. This village down here had complained about erosion, but what they had done is they'd removed pretty much every tree from this small watershed and every shrub. So we would go in there and do a mechanical restoration of their watershed for them. I'm always available. I still get emails from Afghanistan. I love it. I will always respond to any email question, and so will John Fripp with the USDA. He certainly volunteered his time here. Any questions? Yes?
So as we transition and put more of the male and the Dale in charge of this stuff, and just out of curiosity from your own experience, are you seeing brigades move from that approval process and submitting to the male, then getting an actual expert to review the project submission? Is there any of that going on, or how are they doing it, or how are they trying to engineer that for the future?
I'm going to give that to Charles, who just came back a little while ago. But my own experience is that right now we're not doing a lot of these large projects, right? So a lot of what you folks will do, I think, is in the CA, is have awareness of these construction methods. Because as you're out in the village or something like that, and you see something wrong, it isn't keyed in, right? If you see something wrong, then step on it. That's one thing. As far as experts with the Male and Dale, there are some watershed projects that are coming up. That's only in the Cobble watershed and Balk up in the north. We do usually have embeds, but USDA is pulling out. Charles, anything else you can add?
There's a new program in RC South. I know it's called SICA, Stability in Key Areas, SIKA, and about once every 2 weeks I was going to Kandahar and training the Afghan engineers. They were all hydrogeologists, hydroengineers, and they had bachelor's degrees essentially from different Afghan universities, and they would come together, and I was giving them talks like from ADAPT and the stuff that we were doing in our villages, and they were eating it up. So I went back probably 3 or 4 times in like February, March to work with this SICA group, and I don't know who funds them, but they're all Afghan engineers, speak very good English, and I think they're the arm of I believe it's funded through MRRD.
About the European, okay.
You know, one thing I wanted to say, and I forgot to say it, and I finished a little bit early, Paul, so I have just a minute yet? Okay. We have built a lot of projects that cause problems or fail, and I think that's a lot of my talk. When you do if you do, let's call this a stream channel, we put in flood walls. So you want to stop the erosion over here, say. We'll put in a wall like this. What's that do to this? It narrows this up. So you're going to raise the river, so to where it was flowing, it's going to be flowing up here. Actually, what this does is raise the river level, and so downstream and upstream both are affected by this. Downstream, the river's going to raise and it's going to flood downstream. Now, you might have protected this guy's property here with a flood wall, but that gets pretty temporary. You know, you're going to cause destabilize people both upstream and downstream. So that's again why you want to go into things like flood walls. You want to go into using a subject matter expert to actually and to evaluate something like this. Remote sensing is a great tool too. You can look at the gradients and you can look upstream and downstream. What would happen if I put in a flood wall here, a big flood wall? Is it susceptible to blowing out some village downstream or something? It's usually something I say when I'm talking about flood walls, and it just came to me. Any other questions?
What you're saying then is that given the change of mission, that Afghan First, that the funding available for water type projects are probably on the wane here. So I guess the key message here for our folks is that water is it's probably going to come up during your discussions with Dale or communities, but it's more or less kind of going down a checklist of looking what has been done in their areas, correct? And seeing how they can be, if they're not working,
yes,
how to deal with those things.
Yep, a lot of that. But there's also a lot of these projects are not, they're not expensive. Let's say that you do have a small budget. Well, what can we do? We can do things like we'll buy the concrete if you will do the lining of the canal. But if you're going to do that, I want you to put a couple check dams in up here. You'll have to do these kind of. So for a couple $1,000s worth of concrete materials, they don't have a couple $1,000s. If you can provide the materials, you make a negotiation for the labor, but step outside just the lining of this one thing. Say, well, I also need you to put in these check dams or some erosion control measures in other places. So you'll have to be more inventive because you'll have small budgets, as I understand it. You won't have large budgets. You won't be doing what the Georgia ADT did and put 5,000 people to work. But you can still do pretty effective things, small community-oriented small projects. Yeah.
When you did these projects, did you get with the local Marab just to find out, who's in charge of the water and who it's going to be affecting? Like, how would you approach that?
Absolutely. I don't talk a lot about the social aspects because other people do it more eloquently than I do. But all of these, what we would do is we try to make the Afghan government the face of it. So the Afghans have extension agents in some areas that work, some they don't. If you do have your Dale has an extension agent, an extension program, and you can grab that guy and have him be the face of it, that's the best. So it's Afghan oriented. And a lot of these larger watershed projects, we would try to stay out of it completely. Our only QA was through photographs or flyovers and try to make it all Afghan. Second thing is you have to know who is in the village, who the elders are of the village, who are the respected people. And a real good trick is on a project that you're doing, go in there to the village, find the elder, identify his first or second born son. That's a person that can't be messed with. He's born in a position of power and authority. Put him in charge of the project. That makes it a little bit more sustainable if he has skin in the project. He's directing it, and then he is told also to maintain it after we leave. So if these kind of arrangements can be made, that's what I was talking about, the seasonal work that you do. In the winter, you try to establish those relationships, find out who's who, and train the teams and put the right people in charge. And that's a great question. I really don't speak to the socioeconomics, but I could for an hour or two. Charles?
Excellent comment on her question, and I would add that one thing that I found from this last deployment was that there are only MIROBs assigned to villages where there are multiple communities sharing water sources. If you have a village that has their own Perez, there's no such thing. They don't even know what a MIROB is because, like you said, maybe one of the elder sons is in charge of cleaning that canals or something like that. So MIROBs are like a social construct where people have to share water and it's supposed to be done on an equitable nature. But I went to villages and asked, who's the MIROB? My first couple months there, and they're like, we don't even know what that is.
Yeah,
So
and
in Kandahar, where there's lots of people sharing the Arghandab River, there are definitely MIROBs associated with different communities. So.
you know what the MIROB is? He's the person that's actually in charge of water distribution. You know, down this canal, who gets water this day and who gets water this day. And the MIROB is not supposed to own land himself. He's supposed to be sitting above that. He might be a second or third or fourth generation MIROB. I don't know if I've ever seen one in a village. I mean, it is an Afghan construct. We just didn't see him where I was at.